like agriculture for our students. Thank you.
Mr. Chu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Macdonald-Laurier Institute, it's a nonpartisan think tank which champions the value that led to the creation of Canada and its emergence as one of the world's leading democracies, a place where people may live in peace and freedom under the rule of law. On April 19th, the Chinese embassy issued a statement condemning MLI for its actually publication. Will this government stand up for Canada and its value against such unreasonable assertions by the Chinese Communist Party?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this government will always stand up for Canada. This government will always stand up for free speech and freedom of expression in Canada. And let me say that I personally hold the Macdonald-Laurier Institute in very high regard. I think I've given a speech there. It's a great group.
Mr. Chu.
Mr. Chair, I'm willing to share 30 seconds of my time for the member opposite to highlight how they're going to do that. Thank you.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister in 30 seconds or less.
I think I just did, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Chu.
Well, in my humble opinion, she didn't. But anyway, let's switch over. Another question here. WHO officials believe countries were given much time to implement protective measures before its official pandemic declaration mid-March, and that countries like Canada should not have waited for the declaration to act, given the damage was so apparent in China. Yet the Canadian government insisting on delaying a practical response to protect Canadians and rely on the WHO to make their decisions. Why did this government not act sooner to protect Canadians?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the premise that underlies that question is quite frankly incorrect. In fact, in early January, Dr. Tam convened our first of our daily calls to discuss the ongoing outbreak in China and what that might represent for Canada. She also immediately convened the Special Advisory Committee of Chief Public Health Officers across the provinces and territories to begin planning for what potentially could become an outbreak in Canada. We also took additional screening measures at the borders, increasingly adding countries as the pandemic grew.
Mr. Chu.
Mr. Chair, the government of China has revised the death toll in Wuhan by increasing it by 50%. The health minister says that she trusts the data coming out of China. So does she believe the data was right before or after the revision?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I will point to the fact that data has been a challenge amongst all countries in this outbreak. In fact, the speed at which infections have occurred, the outbreaks and the intensity of the outbreaks in many countries, including some of our closest allies and partners like Italy, like Germany, like Spain, like the United States, has demonstrated that data is very difficult to gather when you're in the middle of an outbreak. I know that the World Health Organization, as are many other international organizations, reviewing the data that's coming out of countries.
Mr. Chu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Taiwan has previously held an observer status in WHO under the name Chinese Taipei, but was unjustly removed due to the influence of the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. Following their strong response to COVID-19, will this government of Canada acknowledge Taiwan's invaluable contribution to the global community and support it obtaining observer status independently again?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, yes, indeed. Canada believes that Taiwan's role as an observer in the WHO assembly meetings is in the interest of the international health community and is important to the global fight against pandemic and disease. We have experience of working with Taiwan as an economy in APEC, where Canada participates as well.
Mr. Chu, a very brief question, please.
All right, just a follow-up. The public officials in Canada have issued praise for China's swift response to COVID-19. What does our government believe it should learn from China and its response to in future crises?
Well, Thank
The
you
Honourable
very
Minister.
much. The extent to which China tried to contain the outbreak from spreading to other countries was noted by public health officials across the world as extraordinary. I think there is lots to learn from all countries, and in fact, I think one of the lessons learned for all countries is that we can never let our guard down again, and that we will have to work even more closely and more collaboratively internationally to prevent future outbreaks.
Mr. O'Toole.
Mr. Speaker, it's good to see our parliament